Okay, everyone. My name is Rodney Jackson. I am one of the senior team members at the Geotech Center. A couple of things. One, I want to welcome you to our GIS Day activities. We do appreciate your attendance and hope you find this information useful. And you stay throughout the day. We got a lot of good presenters coming up. I'm going to kick it off initially with on this track with Dr. Tom Mueller. I referenced the GIS Day activities. So what I've put in the chat window are links to the GIS Day itself, as well as a link to the Geotech Center itself and what we do there. And if you have any questions, please let us know. But look in your chat window for those locations. It should be helpful if you have any additional questions. As always, you can reach out to any of the Geotech Center members for that. And so without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Tom Mueller. Dr. Mueller has taught at California University of Pennsylvania for over 14 years. He has taught a wide variety of courses, including world regional geography, GIS, crime mapping, demographic analysis, and spatial models in public safety. His research agenda has grown dramatically throughout his career at CUP. He applies spatial theory to the real world, particularly using geographic information systems. His key to building a successful research agenda is to produce work through a variety of scholarly endeavors, including conference presentations, grants, technical reports, book reviews, and publications in professional journals. He has also taught numerous GIS workshops for members of local community, faculty, as well as the K-12 community. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Tom Mueller. Tom?
All right, good morning, everybody. Appreciate you coming here on a wonderful day, hopefully where you are. And again, I'm going to be talking about mapping conflicts. But before I do that, I guess I better answer a few people's questions, right? Yes, Virginia, there is a California in Pennsylvania. Okay, we are located about 35 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, and we are a regional university part of the Pennsylvania state system of higher education. Okay, so hopefully that gets you going. So again, what I want to talk to you today is about something called the Armed Conflict Location Event Data Site. And it's a really neat website that has a dashboard that allows you to really have your students examine conflict within different countries. So what I have for you, the setup for today is I'm going to give a small presentation. I'm going to keep it in this mode because I know that sometimes keeping it in full slideshow mode sometimes works a little slower over Zoom. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the website and I'm going to show you an exercise that I give my students that actually has become very successful. Students really get into the assignment and we go from there, okay? And then I'm going to let you attack it and I'll stick around for the 45 minutes if you have any questions. So hopefully this will be somewhat interesting for you, right? Okay, so here's the definition. I'm not going to read it all, but what you need to know is the ACLID data set is based on events. It looks at specific events. Now, they could be battles, they could be riots or protests, okay? But what they have in their database is those events, the dates, the actors, the locations, and the fatalities. And they have it for a wide area over the earth. They really started out on the continent of Africa, and they've sort of expanded to South Asia and Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And now they're into Latin America and the Caribbean and Eastern Europe. And in fact, they've also added a United States set of data to examine the riots, the riots and protests that have been going on within our country over the past year. So again, this gives you a general sense, but here is, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest word when it comes to education: free use. Okay, this data is free. You don't have to pay for it. If you use the dashboard, you don't even have to download the data. You can use the website onto itself. And obviously, for those of us, even those of us at these small universities, that is a great information, a great setup for using this data, because I don't have to worry, do the students have a PC? Do they have a Mac? all those other kind of great things, okay? So what are the types of events? I sort of hinted to a few of these. They're looking at battles between government and non-government actors, violence against civilians. They've also have a set of data on remote violence, riots, protests, and even strategic development. And I'll discuss a little bit about these as we go through this information. And again, here is the real key. You can get a date, you can get a location. Now, what I want you to know is every event is onto itself an event. So if you have a 5-day battle, okay, going on, every day will be a singular event. So please be aware of that. And as far as fatalities, that's the one attribute that you want to just give a little bit of information about as far as your students, because they do discuss in the methodology of doing the fatalities that, you know, they try and make sure they get as accurate as possible, but you want to take that as those of you, I'm going to show my age here, but those of you who remember Mary Poppins with a spoonful of sugar. There's also a very interesting setup here in location, and I'll discuss that when I go to the dashboard. But I use this data set also to discuss the issue of accuracy and precision and having students understand the data quality of some data. So again, I'm going to take you to the data set live here in a minute, but this is what the website looks like. Okay, you sort of get this information of what's going on throughout the world at this time, and then you're going to click what's called the dashboard. Okay, and right here you have this dashboard. Again, I'm going to show you how to do this in an exercise I created for my students. And as you can see the large amount of countries that they talk about. In fact, I'm actually working right now on looking at the events that are going on in the country of Ukraine. Okay, so again, just as a highlight, we're talking about the coverage. Okay, this is the data that you will see. The North America data is one that you have to download, and I'll talk more about that. But what I have students really focus on is sort of this is Africa. So I teach a course called Introduction to Geography. It's sort of your world regional geography course. But my 2 goals in that course are, number 1, to increase their spatial thinking, and number 2, to make them a more informed global citizen, because I think both of those are important. So obviously we go over each region and we use geographic concepts that are applied to those regions. So hopefully getting them to increase their spatial thinking and become more informed. But the example I'm going to give you, I focus mainly on, when we discuss sub-Saharan Africa. And I find that the reason I have it for that particular one is there's the most data available, and I can get students to really understand some different impacts that are going on. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing here, and I am going to reshare to the website. All right, so here is the website, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of back it up a little so you can see this, hopefully with Zoom and the internet I have. That's why I'm actually at my university in my office, because I know if I had to battle my kids for internet, we may have some issues. Okay, so this is what the website looks like. You saw this in the PowerPoint, right? And if you move down, you'll see it says go to dashboard. So I'm going to go to the dashboard, and it's going to take a little bit. And what it's going to do is you're going to see the map, the graph, and then over here are the map filters. And so what I do with my students is I assign them a country in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, I'm just going to take you through this step by step. So the first thing I have my students do is click the point view. All right, because we want to see, the first thing they're going to do is examine patterns and locations. All right, so they click the point view. You can see the particular information. And then for this one, I mean, you can have a year's worth of data. For sub-Saharan Africa, you can have 10 years worth of data, but I usually try and set up 5 years. So I come in here, right, and I do the classic date changes that we are doing 2015, January 1. So you can see the date. And then I come over here. Again, you do this year by year, December, and I do 31st. Now, one of the things I will tell you as you're going through this, and I have this exercise actually on the ACLED website, so you'll be able to see it and get information about it. But if students are using specifically Google Chrome or Firefox, they are going to want to set their screen size to 100%. I know some students have their screen very large, but if they have it too large, if they have it, their screen size set at like showing 150%, they're going to miss some of these particular filters, specifically even just the button that says apply filters. All right, I'm not going to pick event type. I'm going to go into region. All right. And we are going to select, oops, sorry. There we go. We're going to select Democratic Republic of Congo. And we're going to see here. There we go. All right. So they've changed this a little. So we're going to go into East Africa. And when you click this, all right, it will show you all of the data. So there's 13 countries, Middle Africa, etc. All right. So I'm going to click Apply Filters. It's going to take a minute. You can see it's sort of loading the statistics, right? Okay. And because I've turned everything on, right, I get the whole country. So I want to select none, Eastern Africa, apply filter. All right. So now we're down into these particular filters. And you can decide, and honestly, it looks like there's a little glitch today, but what should be showing up is the list of countries, and it's not showing up, which means this is why you never do a live demo, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll go under Middle Africa, we'll do Central African Republic, and I'll click Apply Filters. All right. And I'm going to see. All right. So again, there seems to be a glitch on the website. You have to love it when you try and do. But right away, take a look. You can see, have your students examine the map. So the first thing I asked the students to do is I said, now go back under filters, excuse me, and choose each event type. All right. So I've got battles. All right. I've got battles, violence against civilians. So let's just choose battles. All right. I'm going to click Apply Filters. So now we have, and of course, now it's working with Central African Republic, right? And so what I asked the students to do is, let's look at these points. As you can see, some of these points are smaller than other points. Well, that's because, and this is where I can get into discussion on scale, right? Representative fractions, large scale versus small scale, and trying to get that information. Because if I zoom in, watch some of those larger, right? Sometimes they'll sort of separate, right? But what I have the students do is explain the pattern you see. Is it dispersed? Does it look like it is clustered around certain areas? So students will fill out a little table and do that very nicely. Then I said, okay, now take a look at the time graph. Where are your highest events for each of these? So here's battles, right? And then I have them do the same for violence against civilians, okay? And again, looks like 2018 was a big year. Explosions in remote violence. And again, they go through each of these on these applied filters, okay? 2015. And what's great about this is students then start to examine these patterns. Where do they see? Are there matching ones, right? Or are there matching years? And they start to ask those questions. And so a lot of times I'll have students come in and go, well, we saw a lot of, excuse me, battles and violence against civilians around certain areas, but we also saw different areas of riots and protests. And so they're able to understand that and bring that particular table in. So after they fill all of this out, okay, then what I have them do is I say, okay, now that you have this information, now please go out and examine one of them, either battles, riots and protests, etc., whatever you want to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to bring this lesson over so you can see it. Again, we don't have the For some reason, I was not able to share my desktop, so I have to share each of these. Okay, so this is the lesson I was talking about. So here they go through, and again, you can see it step by step. They have the event date, the select the last 5 years, and then I have them choose the drop down. Now I'm going to zoom in a little so you can see, again, figures today's there's a glitch, right? But here, when they pick East Africa, they have the list of those countries. And then they click apply filters. Now I usually give them an example as I go through this. I use Eritrea, but then no one gets Eritrea, right? So what I ask from those events is, generally, where are those events located? Are they in the Northeast, the Northwest, South? Then I ask them, are they close to a capital? If they're close to a capital, are they clustered, or have them go out? And immediately I've had students say, well, I've seen a lot of protests along the rivers. Okay, and they start to understand maybe some of that human environment interaction. And again, as I said, then students go into the events over the year chart, okay, which had the highest peaks. And again, they do this for each of them. I want to move down here. And then here they fill in this table. This is the table I have for them. And they fill in location. Is it clustered or dispersed? So Northeast, clustered in the Northeast, whatever. And the years with the highest. Then what I ask them to do is pick one of these. I don't care if it's battles, violence against civilians, remote violence, riots, or protests. Okay? Pick one of them. And then start to do your own research. Are these, let's just use protests. Are these protests cultural? Are they political? So for example, two political parties who are protesting each other. Is it economic? Does it have to do with new agricultural or new export regulations that maybe the country has set up? Is it historical? Do we see some sort of issue from the past that is still relevant today for whatever reason? Or is it environmental? Or is it a combination of all of these? Okay. Then what I have the students do is they come into class, and of course, this was kind of interesting in this very virtual way. I had to set them into break rooms, but I would divide them up by regions. So all of the students who had countries in East Africa, you go talk. And I had them discuss the similarities and differences that they found with each of these, okay? And all of a sudden, students were starting to ask questions and starting to realize, especially those students, honestly, who had Eastern Africa and had Sudan and South Sudan, right? They started to see those connections. But what then I did was the students had to stand up, and I didn't do this with all students. My intro to geography class can be anywhere from 65 to 90 students. So to give you a sense of how large it can get. But I just pick random students and say, tell me what you found, and then compare that to one of the people that are in your group. And they would go ahead and do that. And then after hearing a few, the people, for example, in Western Africa said, hey, wait a minute, we had some of the same issues. And they started to really get into, what was going on. So for example, one of the ones that was very popular, or that got a lot of information, shouldn't say popular, right? But got a lot of discussion was the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Okay, there's a conflict mineral battle going on there. In fact, more people have died in the Democratic Republic of the Congo over these battles than people who died in battles in World War II. And students started to say, well, what's going on? What are these conflict minerals? Why are they happening just mostly on the eastern part? So then you bring in the physical geography, right? And so students really started to examine this. Now, one of the things I would like to do, and I haven't done it yet, is after giving them this particular topic, is then picking some of a country from another region and have them do that comparison. All right, so this is that, and I'm going to show you where all of this information is, and they present their findings in class. Okay, so now, again, I got to stop sharing, and I'm going to go to share. I'm going to go to Google. Okay, and of course, you have to love, there we go. So I'm going to go back to the website. And if you go under data you've got the data, and then you have the dashboard, and you can see you can export. Now, ACLED used to make it very easy to export data. You just would go in, you'd accept their conditions, and you could download it. You now have to just fill out a form. It doesn't take long because they need to know who is downloading their data. And honestly, the reason they had to do this is there were some commercial entities that were downloading the data, not really doing anything different to it, but then selling it to other people. So they had to, change that up. But there's also this called resources. And this is called ACLED in the classroom. So right here, and I'll put these links in the chat for you here in a minute. This is the exercise I just went over, and it's the analysis of armed conflicts in Africa. Okay, that's the one I went over. Here is another one I did, and this one's on the Taliban. And this one, what I did was I downloaded data into ArcGIS Online, and downloaded the data and uploaded it to ArcGIS Online, and then students went through the particular methods. And the reason this one's so interesting is that the ACLED team was able to get access to a blog or a set of data that the Taliban keep themselves. Okay, and just hold on one second before we start. I started to show students the different labs, the different events. And all of a sudden, I'd be like, okay, let's take a look at this. And this is from all the official reports, not just government reports, but newspapers, media. Let's take a look at what we see here. And we went through battles, and I think we went through violence against civilians, okay? Then what I did is I turned that data off, and I just showed them the data, I believe it's called the Voice of Jihad, the data that ACLED gleaned from that data set, and we put that data up. And one of the first things you see is that in the official reports, the government, the newspapers, the violence against civilians is shown. When you pull up just the Taliban data from that Voices of Jihad, none. There's zero. So immediately we start discussing those types of things. Then we start to get in even further, because within battles, there are subgroups. So how much did the non-government actors take land? And what we started to see in the official records, again, those government reports and newspaper media, is the Afghan government was not as open with the information when the Taliban were making inroads, taking certain areas. Where in the Taliban, every little time they took a little piece of land, right, that information was then recorded. So now we get students to start to discuss, wait a minute, I need to start thinking about not only what the map is showing me, but where did this data come from, and what maybe things are the data not showing me, and why they're not showing it to me, okay? So again, that is in ArcGIS Online. That is available to everybody. Again, you can download these, you still have to register, but I don't know if Zoom will like this, but we'll give it a shot here. So let me go under my content. There were some glitches between trying to do all this. All right, so here is that. And again, this is available to anybody. If you download that exercise, it has this link. Okay, it did work. All right, so here is all of the data I was talking about. This is all the official reports. And this is all the data from the Voices of Jihad. All right, and again, those of you who are familiar with ArcGIS Online, you can do a bunch of filters with students and have them start to ask questions about the data that they are examining. And students, I wasn't able to do that this semester because, again, running Zoom and running this and running something else, we had glitches. But when we did the face-to-face, all of a sudden, last spring when I went over this, students were like, wow. And they started to really question even some of the stuff in their everyday life. And I don't want to take complete credit for this idea. What I ended up doing was I ended up reading one of the reports that the ACLED team put together, and I was like, that would make a great exercise. So that's the other thing is you can have your students go through this process. For example, in this, particular example, then have them read the article. And what I found was, and I don't know about your students, but at least my students, they're real weary that they can't do the work that these outside researchers are. Okay, and I'm not even talking academic journal articles at a college level, right? These just reports that are coming. So by having them do this, this gave them confidence that they could do this type of information, that they could do this type of research and start to ask those questions. So that is, and what I want to do, I'm going to take this and, sorry, and here is everyone in the meeting. So that is the resources. And then what I will do is, let me just make it easy for you and go to the dashboard. And this is the link to the dashboard. So there you go. And again, you gotta wonder, right? Ah, wait a minute, we might be working now. Maybe I got more. Let's see if it is. Yes. Okay, so there must have been a little glitch. The glitch is now working. Gosh, gotta love this. Let me tell you what, if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. That's the Mueller rule. So again, you can take a look at Eastern Africa, okay, and assign those students those particular countries that you want, and that way you don't have everyone picking one country, right? I've had that happen before. We have Middle America, right? And again, let me show you this because I do want to show you. So let's do Democratic Republic of the Congo, because again, this was one that got a lot of students really talking. All right, so you can see all of these events happening on the East, and immediately when the students that were assigned the Democratic Republic of the Congo, they were like, well, wait a minute, you know, why is that happening all over there? And honestly, I had a couple of students say, well, I wonder if there's issues with Uganda or Rwanda. They're not official problems. There are non-state actors from those particular countries that are having these events, having battles, not necessarily battles. Again, I think you'll see a lot of violence against civilians and explosions and remote violence. So what I was going to do was, first off, I will entertain any questions right now, and then if you want, you can go into the dashboard and play around with this particular map filter, and I'll be here to answer any questions on that. But are there any general questions that anybody has? Okay, sounds of silence. Okay, so what I would ask for the next maybe 10 minutes, not a lot of time, but go under that dashboard link and start to play around with the filter. You can just minimize Zoom, play around with the filters. If you have any questions, where does the data come from that is reported? Excellent question. So this data is taken from media sites, from government reports, and what they do, and actually I got a chance to do it in the summer one time, was you go through it and they have this nice process where you're pulling that information from the reports, pulling that information from the media, and plugging them into an Excel file that obviously then gets put into these particular maps. Now, one of the things obviously you find out is most of that information, doesn't matter if it's a media report, government, different media reports, they'll all have the same information, but it's the fatalities. Anytime you have fatalities, that's where you get different ones. I forget which one I was looking at I think it was maybe Nigeria in the summer, and one newspaper had 10 had died in a remote violence. Another reported that 7 had passed away, and the government report said 25, right? So there are different rules for what we accept and what they put in fatalities. And then there's a note section that says, you know, just so you're aware, this is that information. And the other great thing is when you download this data, I know you guys it's not available here because it would be way too much, but they also have exactly where this data was acquired. So they have these little things. Was it local and the specifics? So for example, the United States, it may be New York Times, CNN, Georgia police state trooper, if it was maybe a protest in Atlanta. That was a great question. Any other questions? Okay, again, you can keep asking questions. What I'd ask is to go out to that dashboard, play around with the data. I'll still be here. You can come in, punch up your information on the chat, and I will do my best to answer it. Possibly I have my screen shared so I can go through and see if I can find the issue. Again, you got to love this particular website. And what I will tell you, as far as if you assign this as homework, which obviously I do, and I have 2 sections of 200 students, try and tell the students not to wait till the last minute, right? Because if you have even 100 students hitting the site at the same time, it is going to be extremely slow. So again, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully you found that helpful and exciting, or maybe useful. And again, I'm going to stick around here till 11:45 if you want to go out and take a look at the website and use the filters to answer any questions.
I'm going to rally back at 11:40 and read last final wrap-up questions after they go to the site.
Okay, well, I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear the trains coming by, because I am at my office and there is a train track right behind my office. But I'll be monitoring the chat, and then let's say we come back, like I said, now about 7 minutes at 11:40, and I'll sort of do a wrap-up, okay? Sound good, Rodney?
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Hi, we have a question. If we could access the data for the US, you can access it, but you will need to register for ability to download that data. And that's one of the situations they had, was the US data. So you need to go here and you set up an email account with them, or an account with them, and then you'll be able to download it. I'll give everybody just 1 more minute, and then I will finish up the presentation. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to do, and I did have it on the first slide, but here is my email address, okay? Mueller@calu.edu. I can also put it in the chat. If you have any questions about ACLID, I'd be more than happy to share them with you. I also want you guys to know that I'm currently working on a few more exercises so that ACLID in the classroom will be expanding as we move along. But do we have any more questions about the ACLID data set? All right, I'm not seeing any in the chat, Rodney, so I think we are good on this one. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Tom. The work Tom's doing obviously is quite important given the current state of affairs around the world. I want to thank Tom for his efforts here and ongoing efforts in this area of research. Also, we'll be here for a few more minutes, but the session does close at 10:45, and you have the next one coming up at 11. I have put the links to the schedule here in the chat window. So you don't have it in front of you, you can click on it and go to the website and find out where you're going to be going next. But we'll be here for a few more minutes, but if you want to plan on adjusting the next session, we understand. We'll be here for a few minutes to answer questions. Don't forget, our next session comes up at 12 o'clock, top of the hour. So thank you very much for your attendance and your willingness to understand this area, and thank you very much to Dr. Mueller for the presentation.
You're welcome. Take care, everybody. Be safe. Have yourself a great Thanksgiving.